despite how hard the Obama administration's really trying to get Obamacare up, because this is really hard, so you just got to appreciate how much we try. Democrats are finally jumping off the Obama train and saying, Teddy was right. Maybe we should delay this for a period of time. Let's talk about that next. Let's try on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln from Carbondale to Elgin that we can collectively continue to tolerate the insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East St. Louis, Illinois.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizen.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
Feel like a black republic, money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood.
I guess the best way to start this version of Get Right with Lenny McAllister, the podcast where you and I get a chance to vibe and talk and go back and forth. Twitter, LennyMcAllister. You know Facebook, it is tinyurl.com/Lenny Page. I guess the best way, and again, thank you for joining me. Let me not act as though I appreciate you being here. I absolutely positively do enjoy interacting with you for about 20, 25 minutes every single weekday here on LennyMcAllister.com. Before I get into this, I just want you to know, although it's going to sound like it is, I'm telling you it's not. This is not the I told you so version, the I told you so episode, the I told you so edition of Get Right with Lenny McAllister. Because although I have been against Obamacare, asterisk, in its current form, and I have to continue to say that, because when you say you're against Obamacare, usually the response is one of two things. Number one, you don't like President Obama. I don't dislike President Obama. Look, I have an affinity for black men with big ears. If you've never seen a picture of me, you probably don't quite understand what I mean by that. But I'm just letting you know. So it's not like I dislike the man. I don't like this policy, asterisk, in its current form. And by the way, people aren't signing up for it. The computer system's not working right. The bureaucracy probably is going to be a mess. A lot of the contractors from the bureaucratic side of this, as well as from the technical side of this, are expressing more and more concerns as well. So it's not as though I'm whack crazy for opposing Obamacare, asterisk, you go ahead, say it, in its current form. So it's not because I don't like the president that I have this stance, and it's not because I'm a Republican that I have this stance, which is why the asterisk's there. And there's plenty of Republicans that have said this. They have flat out said, it'd be interesting to see. I have an opportunity to meet with, to have a chance to talk to, perhaps, Senator Pat Toomey, who was involved in this fight on Capitol Hill recently. Senator from Pennsylvania. I'm going to have an opportunity, hopefully, to talk to him here in my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a little later on Thursday night. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on later on this evening. But with that said, I would like to see, he voted against the deal that got it over to the House that got the government reopened. So I'm curious to see what he ends up saying, and I'll share that with you over the coming day or so once I hopefully have a chance to talk with him. But with that said, it's not because I hate the president, and it's not because this law is 100% horrible. There are good things in this. However, what you're finding, and this is why I'm telling you this is not the I told you so version, edition, episode of Get Right with Lenny McAllister. The reason why it's not that is because of this. Is because although I still disagree with the methodology that Ted Cruz took, and I'd be curious to hear what Senator Toomey has to say about that. It's his colleague. But more than that, you have to look at the effectiveness all around. Pre-existing conditions, it's good that people can get health insurance. That's a good thing. The sign-up is bad. The bureaucracy has questions. Everybody's pointing fingers at each other. You have these hearings going on Capitol Hill where everybody's blaming each other. And now you're starting to see Senate Democrats jump off the Obamacare train with President Obama and Kathleen Sebelius leading the initiative, leading the drive to keep this going into the muckety-muck that is the Obamacare rollout 2013. You're seeing them jump off board in this direction. And you could sit there and say, well, this is election politics, and what do you expect? These people were vulnerable in 2014. They want to win elections. They want to make sure they keep the Senate. They would like to have a chance to win the House of Representatives. So the Blue Dogs are coming back. Well, before you go into that, let me remind you that when the Obamacare process started in 2009 and went through 2010 and went through an eventual vote and parliamentarian tricks on Capitol Hill and ignoring the majority of the country and one of the two major political parties, after enduring all of the backroom deals where you had Gatorade in Florida, and you had the Cornhusker kickback in Nebraska, and you had the Louisiana Purchase in Mississippi, Louisiana. It was a joke. Before you had all these things going on, you had a set of blue dog Democrats. Before you had the Stupak deal at the 11th hour from President Obama, an executive order saying, I promise the money won't go towards abortions, although I can repeal this executive order whenever I like. But Bart, I promise you, dude, fingers crossed, not fingers crossed, that will keep this in play. Before all those things came to light, there was a pocket of blue dog Democrats that did not want to go down this path with the rest of their party. They had to be, quote unquote, persuaded. Now, for those of you that say, well, that's how Washington works, you got to basically bribe each other legally to get stuff done. Isn't that the problem with Washington? Isn't that the problem with politics nowadays anyway? Either you have people that have been in politics for far too long and have too much power, and no one can ever recalibrate the system because people have been in there forever. They're like that old rug that is getting ratty and is dirty, but you don't want to lift it up because you know you got to clean up the dirt underneath it before you can get the room back to where it needs to be. Isn't it because of that and all these backroom deals between these types of individuals to keep stuff going? So, again, before you start with this, I'm not surprised that Joe Manchin, who was a pro-NRA Democrat in West Virginia anyway, now all of a sudden he's crafting a bill saying let's do a delay. That you're hearing other Democrats, including Kay Hagan, who is facing Tom Tillis, Speaker of the House in the North Carolina General Assembly, for the U.S. Senate seat in 2014, where she's saying maybe we delay it a couple of months. You know what? She's sounding more and more like a sensible Republican. So is Manchin. So are others. And this is not because of the politics of the situation. I know that some of you might think that that's what this is boiling down to, and I'd love to have your feedback on Twitter or on Facebook. You know where to find me. Twitter, LennyMcAllister. Just simply my first and last name on Twitter. Appreciate your feedback. I'm going to continue to, and I told you on Friday, we'll get into a little bit of the back and forth. There's been some questions, some feedback. I appreciate you all reaching out to me. And unless if there's a breaking news story or something, then I'll push it on the background. But I promise you, the questions and the comments that you give me on Twitter, Facebook, etc., I will get to. I promise. I love the interaction. Love the interaction. And one of these days when we grow back from a podcast back into a full-fledged radio show, you'll see. I love having the interaction on the phone lines. Did so at WVON, and I welcome that again in the near future. With that said, this has nothing to do with election politics. It has nothing to do with election politics. The bottom line is this, and those of you that want to disagree with this, feel free. Give me your feedback. America is still a center-right, center-left kind of country. And I would venture to say we're center-right when it comes to economics, we're center-left when it comes to social policy. And that's all there is to it. So every time you see somebody going too far one way or another, you still see a movement that reeks of recalibration politically. Now, you could sit there and say all you want about the Tea Party movement, but if they were as far off the rails as we call them to be in 2013, 2010 should not have happened. So when you look at 2010, two things must have transpired. Number one, they had a lot of momentum, including a lot of resources, which they did. Tea Party element did. I was involved in that. Some things I don't like that the Tea Party movement's doing now, but we're talking about 3 years ago, and they know my disagreements with them. I love them as children of God, but we disagree on some things. But number two, somebody had to go too far the other way. Because if you're staying in that center-left pocket and you're trying to fight off the extreme right, and as long as you're in pocket, why do you need to look to see if the grass is greener on the other side? Why wouldn't you have your defenses up to make sure that you don't lose certain seats? Now, I contend to you that because, and I've said this before, the three people that ran Washington, D.C. in 2009 and 2010 were Rahm Emanuel, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid, and that was President Obama's problem. If he would have put his foot down, I think, sooner, in the beginning of his first term, I think that the Republicans would have been more involved in the crafting of a health care reform solution, and I think, politically, Republicans don't make the gains that they made in 2010, and they don't have the House of Representatives in 2012 or in 2013, and of course, obviously not in 2011. So, at some point in time, you have to look at this and you have to understand that hearing about Manchin and Hagan and others, hearing about this is not a response to 2014 being around the corner. This is them finally voicing their concerns. The same exact way people continuously talk about how the Republican Party is having this civil war, which it is, and how McCain and some of the moderate Republicans, some would say are bringing sense back to the party, others would say are selling out conservatives in the party. Just the same, you are now finally starting to hear, and it'll be interesting to see what the mainstream media does with this. You are now starting to see the moderate Democrats look at the progressives and say, you have gone amok long enough. You have basically soiled our brand to centrist America long enough. And number one, we need a solution that makes sense for people. Doing Obamacare as is with all the problems that it has right now does not make sense for America. That's number one. Number two, and I keep saying this, I don't understand why they don't use this messaging. The self-repeal of the Obama administration has been selective, unconstitutional, and unfair. Why not continue the self-repeal and just call it a full delay of Obamacare? Even if you don't want to call it a self-repeal, because in some regards, that's what it's been. The exceptions mean that the law has been repealed for certain people. So that is a repeal. Other instances, it's been a delay. Why don't we go with a full delay and move forward from there? Now, you could sit there and say, well, any Republican's going to say delay this. That's not necessarily true. I think that there are Republicans that would want people with pre-existing conditions to be covered at this point in time. I think there are people that would say if your 24-year-old is still in school, still living at home, you've been blessed enough to keep your full-time job through this wonderful recovery. That was sarcasm. Snark, snark. Cynicism. Snark. You should be able to keep your kid on your health insurance, and hopefully they're in school, by the way, so that they can help improve this economy as well. I don't think there are any Republicans that, at this point in time, that would go against that. But you're starting to see from the Republican Party and now from more and more Democrats publicly. One could argue that they've been around for a while. They've kept quiet. They went along to get along. In 2010, they see, we won the 2012 elections. We got President Obama back in the White House, and this still isn't working out. So we need to do something because, number one, It's an embarrassment to the party, not just the White House and not just HHS. It's an embarrassment to the party, the Democratic Party. Number two, and more importantly, the more gaffes and the less confidence people have in government. And government's going to be the face of this recovery still, driving this recovery, trying to stoke confidence for the American consumer and the American employer. And as long as the government is in that role, which, by the way, as long as the Obama administration is in place, they're going to be in that role. They're not going to hand that responsibility over to the American people anywhere near as much as a Republican president likely would. So as long as the Obama presidency is in place, and I'm not calling for any type of, I'm not doing that. You know where I'm going with that. I'm not going to even say the word today. I hate those things. I don't like the conspiracy stuff. It's just ridiculous. Anywho, as long as the Obama presidency is still in play, which is going to be in effect until January 2017, you need the face of government, since government's going to be driving all this anyway, at least from the White House's perspective. You need them to instill confidence in the American consumer and the American employer. And when you have these types of high-profile gaffes and blunders and misunderstandings and finger-pointing and political massaging, which still doesn't fool anybody, when you have all these things constantly and continuously going on, guess what? People are not going to get back to work. When they go back to work, they're going to be service-level jobs, lower-paying jobs. And by the way, if you're working in one of these jobs, you're probably not going to get 40 hours a week because your employer doesn't want to cover you under the current parameters, provisions, policies, laws, statutes, whatever word you want to use, of Obamacare. That means, give me your feedback. You know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. But that's my point with this. And I think that there are more Democrats now that understand that this president is going to get a free pass for about another 10 years. You're not going to start writing a truer historical account of the Obama presidency for about another 10 years, until you probably get to 2023. When he's been out of office for a full presidential term, he's starting to really look like an older gentleman. By that point in time, 10 years from now, he'll be 62, 63 years old, somewhere in there. And he'll be living in Hawaii. He's not going back to Chicago. He is not going back to Hyde Park. I'm just telling you that right now. I haven't heard anything, but as his unofficial, evil twin Republican cousin that lived across the street from him in Hyde Park for 3 years, I can tell you, I don't think he's going to move back to Chicago. So he ain't trying to catch Cap, because they're not going to be able to keep him that safe in Chicago. If he wants to go walk around, he's going to have issues right around the corner from his house. So as he's chilling in Hawaii, playing golf, making money, writing a book, and doing speeches every now and then, and completely off the mainland and out of the people's collective eye, that's when you're going to get a true account of what this president did for America outside of breaking the glass ceiling and allowing us to have the first African-American president, allowing us to have the first minority president, allowing us to have the first non-white male president. And I think that the Democrats that are starting to push back on Obamacare realize he's going to get a pass all the way through on some of these issues. Because as long as the Republicans, and some Republicans, not all Republicans, as long as some Republicans continue the animus towards this president based on who he is and not the principles and the policies he represents, and again, some Republicans, I'm not even talking about some Republican elected officials. I'm talking about Republicans overall. Some Republicans at the state level, some Republicans at the county level, some Republicans that are grassroots activists, some, a minority, under 50%, perhaps even under 20%, but just very loud. Some of them are very loud. When they make these type of comments, they are heard. They reverberate. They cause damage to the Republican brand. And that buys him time. I think that these Senate Democrats and others that are coming out and saying, we need to delay Obamacare, understand that President Obama has a cover when it comes to these things that they're not going to have. One, because he's not running for re-election anymore. Yeah, so in that regard, it's electoral. But number two, when it comes to the historical account of leadership, whether it's from a Senate perspective, Congress perspective, White House perspective, etc., they're going to be on the hook faster. And in some regards, if they don't speak up, they're going to be on the hook more in the history of their respective states. So as this continues to play out, you're starting to hear these blue dog Democrats, and one could argue even somebody like a Kay Hagan's trying to become a blue dog Democrat, which is an interesting mix because if she goes up against Tillis, he's considered a moderate Republican. So it's who can get to the Senate the fastest with those two. But we'll see. We still have time. And there's a primary process with the Republicans in 2014 there. But as I close, here's my point. These Democrats are realizing that you're going to have to do something about Obamacare, and you cannot count on the White House because there's too much embarrassment going on and there's too much cover that they have. That's the reason why Sebelius hasn't resigned yet, because that's embarrassment for this White House. You can't make it too obvious. That's the reason why they haven't delayed the individual mandate quite yet, because they can delay the employer mandate and they give the exceptions, but they can hide that under the cover of what the Republicans are saying and doing against this president. But there are certain things they just cannot put under the cover of the media, the cover of spin politics and the like. One of which is the delaying Obamacare. And that's something that more and more Democrats understand that the American people need, regardless of what this very shrewd politician needs. And I want to leave you with this. The more I see this from this White House, the more I say, I don't even know if he's a shrewd politician. I think he's a shrewd campaigner. And a shrewd campaigner allows you to message properly and effectively. Because a shrewd politician would have hid these flaws from the American people, and we would have never heard about this. It would have been a self-delay, would have allowed people to avoid the tax until after the 2014 midterms, and they would have been able to hide all of the computer glitches. But you got to be an effective project manager in chief / politician in chief rather than just a campaigner in chief. That's my take. What's your opinion? You know where to find me on Twitter, LennyMcAllister. You know where to find me on Facebook. In the meanwhile, I will catch up with you tomorrow. Hopefully we'll talk about Senator Pat Toomey. Hopefully we'll talk about some of your questions, and we'll see what else is going on in the world of news. In the meanwhile, I love you. I will talk to you later. TCNGB means take care and God bless.